What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? This is Darian Jones of Honor Kings and Sons TV podcast. I want to be able to give you all a special shout out for all of those who've been rocking with me from day one. Thank you for those who've been subscribing to the YouTube channel. It is up and running. My goal is to, reach that first mark of 100 videos. So I'm making sure I'm consistent every week, dropping videos for you guys and dropping clips. I'm very excited to be able to, share my knowledge, my experience, my heart, with the world. And you guys commenting and liking what I'm doing is just really encouraging. So I thank you all for sure. So please be able to follow me on all social media platforms. If you type in Honor Kings and Sons on all social media platforms, that includes Facebook, Threads, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, you will find me. I have two YouTube channels. So if you type in at DJonesHKS, you will find my entertainment channel. I'm building that up every single week, dropping videos just for you to have a laugh throughout the week. And then definitely, if you type in at Honor Kings and Sons TV on YouTube, you will get my official podcast channel. Right now, I'm dropping a lot of audio clips. I'm working on getting more in-person videos for you guys to enjoy. So definitely, I want to thank you guys for rocking, with me and watching this channel grow. So today, I definitely, always got something to talk about. I got so many things I want to cover, but I randomly saw this video of a fight that broke out. For those tuning in, I'm from Homestead, Florida. One thing about people who live in Florida, anytime you go anywhere, they associate you with Miami. Most people, when you talk about Florida, the number one city they're thinking of is Miami. But this actual video I saw today, it occurred in Miami Gardens, and it was a school fight. And for those who are new, I'll just tell you, I'm a former educator. I was in the school system for roughly 7 years, in private and in charter. I was not in the public school system, but to be honest with you, they're all the same. I know people feel a certain way because, they had to get their certification. Hey, I respect that. Kudos to you. But as far as a person who was there, day and night, working with children and families, helping kids to just really be impacted in the classroom, public, charter, private, they're all the same to me. And so, I've seen my fair share of all types of things. And so this typical video was, a fight that broke out at a school in Miami Gardens. And long story short, it spiraled over into a shooting. 5 people were harmed in the shooting. I believe it was 2 adults and 3 students. And, media does what media does. So they blow it up and they talk about, how they need to, do something about the school system with the violence. They always have that pitch about how they're going to get school safety in and implement more of that. You always have that clip where the parent is talking about how teachers need protection, students need protection, the whole nine, right? So I'm going to tell you that today's episode, I want to talk about my thoughts. I want to share my thoughts on the topic of violence in the school system and this violent target that is on education, that's been on education for quite some time now. Today, I'm gonna sound like a conspiracy theorist a little bit. I'm gonna drop some stuff today. Seriously, I'm gonna just go in, and like I said, this is a person I was in the school system for roughly 7 years. Okay, so let's start somewhere with this. Where can I begin? Okay, first of all, historically, if you guys follow my videos, I'm always encouraging people to, incorporate history into their daily life. Don't just take anything at face value. Trace it back as far as you can. Read books, watch documentaries, travel, do what you can, but get yourself involved in history, especially world history. All right. So when we go back in time and we look at the educational school system, right? Now we have to understand that what it looks like today in 2024 is not what it looked like in the year 1000 AD, right? And when I say that, I'm really trying to get people to understand as far as there being this. It's almost like this. I don't know if it's a hidden nation, a hidden cult, a hidden agenda to attack educational facilities. I I would dare to say that it didn't exist in history. But at the same time, I want to say this, that what education looked like and the structure as far as the physical buildings or the physical places where people met for education were totally different. In every civilization, they had a different name for it, right? I know most people who, you went to public school in some form or fashion, or if it doesn't matter what country you're from, you got some type of modern education or some form of education, right? At some point, you are told about, what education was like for like people, during like the time of the empires and the great civilizations, right? And usually when you look at the structure of those, educational systems, usually the kids who went to school were connected to the military, right? So if you go back in history, and doesn't matter what civilization you choose, usually education is connected, or the structure was connected to the military. Um, I don't remember reading about any civilization where the warriors were stupid or had no cognitive thinking abilities, no critical thinking skills, unless you were dealing with just ravages and savages, right? Even the Vikings, a lot of people paint this picture. That's why you got to be careful watching, not National Geographic, or watching the History Channel sometimes, because a lot of times they paint this grotesque and this, violent picture of groups like the Vikings and the Huns and the Mongols and those different groups. But that's not true. If you really, go in and do some, you search up on these groups, a lot of these people were statesmen, very educated. As a matter of fact, a lot of their diplomatic structure would be the base and the foundation for other groups that we would come to know of their prominence in history, right? So you have to understand that sometimes people love to put other things in the limelight that are not necessarily of a good connotation when it comes to civilizations. So we have to start with that premise that historically education was connected to military, right? So if you ever had a civilization that experienced an attack, right? In terms of like the city was under attack. Usually when one kingdom went after another kingdom, right? It was to take the whole city down. Okay, they may have had a military structure, take down the citadel, take down. For those people who don't know what a citadel is, pretty much the strongest point in a city or kingdom. Your strongest soldiers, your strongest military fortress, the generals, the great minds of the day who were working with the military, right? Like that. If you destroyed that, you pretty much took out, you know, the rest of the kingdom. Nobody is really putting up a fight if you destroy that. So, anytime you had some type of invasion where a kingdom or a tribe or a civilization went after another civilization, that was their game plan, right? To take out that. But here's the thing. The thing was that the people they attacked, right, were actually in the army, and they had already had the time where they were students and got their education. Their focus now is full-time military service, right? So that's the difference. Anytime there was some type of attack that took place, it was focused strictly on, those in military service, those dedicated to fighting for the country, the warriors, the mercenaries, whatever you want to identify when it comes to combat, right? So there was never, to my knowledge, a city, a tribe, an empire where there was some type of uproar inside the actual schools, right? If there was any fighting, if there was any bickering, right? Different cultures and civilizations had different ways of dealing with that. As a matter of fact, you have civilizations that they, in some type of way or another, right? If they saw bickering, if they saw fighting, they had games where that was dealt with. You know, I know a lot of people, because of like television, like about the Spartans and Greece and stuff like that. So you kind of think to yourself, well, yeah, you had the Spartans, the barracks that they lived in. They were being educated and they were being trained at the same time. But they fought amongst themselves, and then, they went back to doing their duties, right? Yeah, you had that, but there was also other civilizations that handled it a little bit different. My point, what I'm saying is that when we look at today in 2024 and we see violence happening, right? It's people who are Americans. They are American citizens, and they are going into schools, right? And they're harming people. Because remember, violence on education is coming in different forms. You have the fights that break out. You have the threats where people call in threats. You have the people who get access to weaponry and they go into the school and they harm students and staff. I mean, we have the countless mass shootings that are recorded in the United States and in the UK. Very few school shootings or attacks on educational systems in other parts of the world exist. Very few. But I mean, as far as the news goes, you constantly see the UK and you constantly see the United States of America. And so I want to kind of help you guys with this so that you can see where I'm getting at. So like I say, when you look back in history, right, anytime there was anything going on amongst a group of people, if there was child's play, right, sometimes you had little war games that the educational structure had, right, because you have to understand that national pride, culture, your country, your tribe, that was like people's heartbeat, and that's why a lot of people sometimes, frown upon Americans, because there's so much about Americans that one minute we will just, it's almost like we don't care for our country, and then the next minute we're patriotic, right? versus other countries where they are diehard. They rep their flag. They don't do anything to desecrate or disrespect their flag. They stand for their people. They stand for their ways. They stand for their culture. 100% diehard, consistent. Americans, 1 minute, look at the Capitol. And don't get me wrong, you do have countries who storm, their prime minister and all that stuff. But when they're doing that, it's an act of justice or whatever the case may be. We know the situation with the Capitol, that was not a case of justice. That was that was some foolishness. We can all agree. So when I tell you about this, I want you guys to understand that nowhere in history do you have this plot to just attack your own educational system, or you allow violence to erupt and it is not curved as far as the culture and the nature of the school, right? You don't curve it. The United States of America, it's legit not like other countries, right? There's other countries where there's some type of combat martial arts training, sports. There's some type of curve that if they see a rowdy kid, right, or if they see a rambunctious group, they try to curve them into an activity that allows them to get that tension out, but allows them in some type of way to do it unto the honor, the glory, of their people. Do it for a good reason. But America is different. America, you can have a kid who feels like the world hates him. He goes to school, he starts, bullying and or stuff like that, and then next thing you know, we see on the news, mental health, pleads insanity, shot up the school, and all that stuff. And I wanna make sure I set the record straight on this. We know that there's children all across the world that experience very disappointing situations, abuse at home, whether it's physical, mental, sexual. We know that, there's kids out there who do experience that. They have no one to talk to. It's hard for them to get access to help and counsel because of fear. And they go to school and they manifest behaviors that, if not addressed immediately or addressed correctly, it turns into something. I'm not negating that at all. What I'm saying is that if we look at America and we go back to the earliest recording of anything like a school shooting, right? I wanna even hit on that for just a few seconds. Something like a school shooting. The first time there was a recorded school shooting in the United States of America, all the way up to 2024. The fact that there's been more than one is crazy. The fact that as a former educator, I have sat in meetings, I have sat in trainings, I have sat and listened to staff talk about this and talk about how, based upon this is how we deem this situation, what they call, quote unquote, a non-credible threat, right? And I never used to say anything when I was an educator. I used to say it to myself. I'm like, man, this is the part of America that scares me the most, is how we have come to a point where we take kids being able to call in school threats. We take fights on school grounds, kids, coming in and out with weapons. We take that very light, right? And people may say, oh, there's the programs, the police come to the school, the metal detector. Listen, man, let me tell you something. As a person who's in the school system for 7 years, I've taught over thousands of kids, worked with a bunch of educators, teachers, principals, police officers, all of that stuff. I'm going to tell you right now, it is insane to to believe that people think it's okay for this subculture to exist of people who can ignite violence. They can ignite violence on school property or in any educational setting, knowing that there's a due process out there that's faulted that they can potentially get away with. And I'm talking about from the lowest thing as a kid being bullied, to a kid bringing a knife or a gun or any type of weapon, to a fight breaking out, to kids chasing each other to another student's home, attacking the family, to bomb threats, school shooting threats, and then all the way up to an actual school shooting happening. The fact that it's almost become subculture. It's like in America or the UK, if your kid goes to public school or if your kid leaves the house to go to any educational setting, even a daycare, there's a potential possibility that some type of violence can happen, and there's really nothing you can do about it. You get what I'm saying? Like it's beyond me. And I'll stick to the United States because I don't live in the UK. I wasn't born there. I do have family. I have friends that I know that live there. So I'll stick to the United States. I don't want to talk too much on the UK. But, for the United States, it's become a subculture, and it's been here for some time. You would have thought that after Columbine, we would have just, activated complete reform of the educational school system, but we didn't. And since Columbine, for those who just so happen to don't know what that is, the famous Columbine shooting, you literally can just type that into YouTube, and it will show you everything. You would think from since then we would have made some drastic changes. Now, I wasn't in the school. I was in the school system at the time. I think it was my third year when they were talking about giving teachers firearms in terms of like having a license to carry a firearm. And I remember I was like, I spent days laughing, and then I spent days in silence because of how scared, I was like, I don't think people realize how even more dangerous they would make the school. I mean, it's coming from an educator. I'll be honest with you. There's days that students love you, and there's days that students will throw you to the wolves. It's the complex of Jesus and Barabbas. For those who know about the story of Jesus and Barabbas in the Bible, Barabbas literally was a murderer, and the Jews pretty much gave Jesus up, because he was not doing what they wanted. And Pontius Pilate was like, "Who do you want?" to the crowd, and the crowd was like, "Give us Barabbas." And right then and there, they threw Jesus to the wolves. So that's kind of the relationship of a teacher and a student. Many times, it's a very toxic relationship. 1 minute it's holly jolly, lovey dovey, and in a split second, you in the principal's office. It's parents, staff meetings. Student try to get you fired. Parents threatening you. I mean, all types of situations. Like, I got to one point in my teaching career, I had to put everybody surface level. I had went through that phase where I trusted my staff to protect me. I went through that phase where I trusted the student to protect me. And when I say protect me, meaning like they know that I am consistently, holding myself upright in front of them, in front of everybody, and that, they would speak highly of me. But no, let me tell you something, man. Sometimes when you're a teacher, you literally have to be like a cop. You can't trust nobody. You have to be like a detective. You can't trust nobody. Or you have to be like a secret agent, or you got to be like somebody who's cold-blooded and has no heart. Sometimes as a teacher, you just got to do everybody with a smile. Keep everybody surface level, because, that's what it is sometimes. So, yeah, it's amazing to me that that in the school system, you would see this, and I mean, it's 2024. I've talked about it before, in my previous topics. If you watch and listen to my video on the entrepreneur, that episode, I talk about it. When I share a little bit of my story in my clip, the remote workforce, you guys can go check that clip out. I talk about it like, the great resignation took place, during COVID, and, it was the perfect opportunity for teachers to leave their profession. No protection from the Board of Education, superintendent, and this is nationwide. Like, I'm talking about United States of America. No protection, whatsoever from the students who are being violent, being disruptive, who are just wreaking havoc. No backup, when it came to dealing with parents. Definitely no backup financially. Definitely no backup or resources when it came to tools and materials to making the learning environment the best possible. So it's like it was the perfect opportunity, and the senior group of teachers left. I'm talking about 45 and older. They were the first ones to dip. And then the new wave of teachers I'm talking teachers because I've actually met a teacher as young as 20 years old, so that's pretty crazy. But I'm talking as young as 25 to 35 coming into the profession of being a teacher. And some of them, the most they stay is 3 years. They see that there's no protection. They do their best to work with the kids, be relevant to the kids. But then you have those moments when things get wild and you try to implement, what the school said they would reinforce you on, and you get thrown to the wolves. So what am I saying? Because it's really so much to unfold. Like, oh my God, it's so much to unfold. But well, what am I really saying is that the violence that exists in the school system, we have to understand that it's a couple of things. Yes, you have the conflict that young people are dealing with. They don't know how to, deal with it. Their parents might be working, their friends are telling them what they want, and they take it to school and they manifest it, and it turns into an uproar. Okay, cool. No problem at all. You may have, a situation where a kid, he's probably, you may have he or she, they fighting for their life. They live in a neighborhood, that's not Beverly Hills, and they fight for their life every day, and they come and they're trying to learn, and a situation they got into over the weekend, it spills into school. That happens, right? And then you have what I feel, and this is my conspiracy part coming out, where I feel that this is planned. It's no secret in the last decade that people have been talking about potential civil war happening in the United States of America. That's no secret. There's no secret that people have talked about, the border being let open, that all the people who have intent to harm America, this is the perfect opportunity, and you just don't know how it's going to happen. You don't know when it's going to happen. But with so many immigrants coming in, you don't know who is coming with intent, to take down America, right? And like I said, obviously, this is definitely not me, saying that all immigrants coming into the country, that, their intent is to, destroy America. Definitely not. But I'm saying that this is something that has been spoken of. So, in psychology, they talk about desensitization. They talk about, how when you put something in front of somebody's face long enough, it becomes the norm to them. They no longer have a bit of sensitivity to question it. So look at the culture that has been created. There is a subculture of violence that is centered around education in America. So many famous mass shootings. We can go on and on and on that have taken place in America. And I was talking to somebody months ago about the history of gang violence, right? There was a period of time in America where gang violence in the neighborhood was plaguing the schools, right? There was a time where teachers, like they can go to the parking lot to go home and they might end up in the hospital, because they might get caught in the crossfire of a gang war, or they might get caught, with a student that's just been planning to harm them all year long, right? So this has been something specifically in America that has been piling up and piling up and piling up. And I personally feel that a part of it is planned. I personally feel that over time, it was just to be allowed more and more and more and more. And like I said, I started off the conversation talking about, in history, you never had a direct attack at the educational system of a civilization from another civilization or another tribe. There was never like a group of people that says, hey, let's infiltrate, the educational system. Let's cause uproar, right? You never see that. You always see the ones who come from the educational system that go into like the military to fight for the company, for the country and represent their country. You see those people get attacked. So I think to myself, I say, what if there is, this plot to put fear into kids going to school, so much so that parents will start to talk about how they don't want anything to protect their kids. Now, hear me out when I say this. When I say they don't want anything to protect their kids, we know that, the right to bear arms, we know about that amendment, right? We know we've had instances where there's been curfews issued because of like riots and violence. We know that, the summer 2020, that went down in history, the violence that was happening and the riots and all of that different stuff going on. And we legit were being issued curfews for that, aside from the curfews they gave us, with COVID and things like that. So what I'm saying is that if you have a parent that says, they need to get the NRA to put more laws on gun control and gun control. And I'm actually going to do an episode about this fairly soon, talking about gun laws. We need gun control. We need gun control. We need gun control. I've said this before in the past. The United States of America is a place that if you want to learn how to protect yourself, you have to pay for it. Because in America, you get sued for anything. People will set you up so they can sue you for anything. So it's like the United States does not have a structure in place where learning how to protect yourself is a part of your educational upbringing here. It's an optional thing here for liability reasons, right? Versus you go someplace like, I'll just be slapstick, Thailand, right? The average kid in a place like Thailand, Indonesia, those places like that, the community knows a form of self-defense, as well as most of the kids who go to school, right? The school that they go to for education, not even a few blocks down the street, there's a school where they can learn a martial art to defend themselves, right? And I'm pretty sure you don't hear, fights breaking out like crazy with that, because obviously it's a part of the culture. So they probably have a structure in place to make sure that that's not carrying over, right? So you have to understand that this is something that we're seeing in America, and we don't have an idea to create some type of reform, right? Now, I remember that I was a kid when martial arts was big in America. and every kid was doing martial arts. I read about it that in the 60s and the 70s, you had martial artists that were arising in America. Some were actually like martial arts, trainers and instructors. Some of them were just action stars and things of that nature, right? But for the most part, martial arts became, I mean, probably every other movie has some type of martial arts element in it in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, especially the 90s. I'm a martial arts fanatic. So many martial arts TV films I've watched, and I love the streaming sites that just have them in bulk. Prime Video. Recently, I saw some on Tubi. So, anyways, I'm just saying that, at one point, martial arts was a part of the American culture. And so, you kids had ways to defend themselves, right? Families had access to self-defense to defend themselves, right? But one thing I'm kind of seeing is that more and more and more there is less things being implemented along with a kid's education in terms of self-defense. And I feel like it's going to get to the point where we're going to just surrender all type of protection and put it directly into the hands of our government. And I personally don't think that's a good idea. And I would hate for us to get to the point where the government controls the guns and the government controls, our access to the art of combat. And I say this tying into violence in the school system because I think if a culture was ingrained in our people, in our families about self-defense, because first of all, I study martial arts, and I've learned martial arts. Always wanted to do it. I didn't start learning it until I was 30, right? And I still practice, as much as I can to this day. So one of the things, if you have a good instructor, you have a healthy, well-balanced instructor who knows, why they teach it and what they do it for, you'll learn that martial arts and things like that is what it's teaching you self-discipline, self-control. How it helps you understand you. You understand you when you're learning that stuff. So it helps you come under a new level of control. So if we are not doing something to make that a part of the educational experience that our students are having in the United States of America, then what we're doing is we're leaving so much room for them to indulge in things, which we already know exists: the drinking, the drugs, the sex, the just inappropriate things that, teens and young adolescents get themselves involved in, particularly when they start in middle school, going all the way up into college, right? In America specifically. Why don't we put those things back in place, right? Have a Taekwondo dojo sponsor a middle school or a high school, or, Krav Maga or MMA, or, have a, I know in my city, in Homestead, Florida, we have what is Homestead Pals, the Police Athletic League. So I know that they do that, the Police Explorers. There's different schools they work with and things like that, right? And if I'm pretty sure, when there's high, instances of violence, acts of violence, fighting and stuff, programs like that can come in and work with the school. So this is where this would be a call to action, to have that happen again, to have these programs partner with these schools, right? Get a mental health facility to partner up as well. Even when it comes to issues of like, well, I really wouldn't even say anything in terms of dealing with mass shootings and school shootings, because that's a whole nother structure. And I know that there's always talks with communities and law enforcement about that. My take on that, I'll save that for another day because I don't want to get lost in talking about that. But in terms of dealing with the violence that we see, like the fights always happening, stuff like that. We need to implement something where the students, can take, those type of aggressions, because it is a part of their hormones now. I mean, that, let's be honest about that. I think people sometimes forget the fact that conflict, is something that does manifest itself in different forms, right? Whether it's provoked, whether it's premeditated, all those different types of conflict are going to arise. So I just think that there needs to become a culture that's brought into our educational system where different forms of conflict are taught to be handled, so that we don't even have to get to the point where we have to resort to violence or see violence resorted to. Obviously, there are some things that parents can do, because a lot of times when we see these fights, as a teacher, I'll keep it real with you. A lot of the structure that's in homes, listen, the parent got to take responsibility for that. I've had eyewitness situations where I'm like, the parent is 100% wrong. And the culture that the parent has in that household is the reason why that kid will fight and not care nothing about it, or that kid will get in the streets, do what they do, and the family don't say nothing until that kid gets incarcerated, or that kid, getting some time for their actions. So that's a part of it too. But what I'm saying is that we just need to definitely start introducing reform. And I think one of the things to be reintroduced is, this whole thing of self defense, implementing things like that, implementing things like, I know this is one thing that I saw, when I was teaching during COVID. There was this thing called social emotional learning. And I remember when this was talked about all across schools, it was on the news, public officials, politicians, everybody was talking about social emotional learning. They wanted, teachers to take out 30 minutes, do what they call an asynchronous activity with the students in order to encourage social emotional learning. When I saw this, because technically it was like an unofficial curriculum. I don't know if it's still in the school system now. I've been out the school system since 2021. But when I saw this, I decided I wanted to take it to a whole nother level. I actually made that the structure and the foundation of my class. And I have an episode I'm going to do when I talk about my time as an educator, and how when technically this component of social emotional learning took my ability to teach to a whole nother level, because of how I made it the foundation, and my students' response drastically changed overnight. And this is something that I don't know if they're not doing it anymore, but they need to do it, and they need to make it bigger than just 30 minutes. It should be a lifestyle that they're introduced to the kids, so that we can have a decrease in violence that we're seeing on school property in the communities that's connected to, anything with the learning environment. I truly believe that if we continue to let this happen, that our educational school system will suffer a blow that is going to change the fabric of America forever. And I'll be honest with you, it will drive people to homeschool. I believe that if we don't address this situation, maybe 5 and 10 years, the public school system will not be a commodity. They close schools every single day because of debt. They close schools every day because of low enrollment. They close schools because of low teacher retention. It's happening more and more and more. And of course, the Great Resignation is fueled that fire. So the only blow left to really shut down the school system in America is violence. If something super violent was to happen, God forbid, to a school or a number of schools within a certain amount of time, I think that's going to be the blow that's going to eradicate education in America. And families will be forced to change their dynamic. God knows, imagine a struggling family. They eradicate the institution of kids going into a building to learn, right? Now a parent has to find a way to maintain a job while making sure their kids are at home safe and learning. And in one way, it's a beautiful thing, regardless if you are a blue collar family or a white collar family. And in other ways, it's a bad thing because it's so much of the family dynamic that would have to change. It would be crazy. And I didn't even talk about the history, or not even the history, the stages of schooling, how it's changed. Let's go into that for a few seconds. The staging of schooling has changed drastically. Like I said, there was a time in history where most civilizations, you know, the schooling was from home. The schooling was from home because, you know, pretty much the whole village, right? It was a culture where you were learning from everybody, right? And you probably had you probably had a group of people. They focused on, focused on the music, focused on the agriculture, focused on the history and just the traditions, right? The mathematics, and then you had the military, the political, the politics. You had all these different, subjects that kids would learn, and then advance on, and then transition into their adult education, right? And a lot of times that was from home. Now, when you get into Southeastern Europe, or you get into Europe, and when you start getting the recordings of history for Europe, this is where you actually start to get the I was going to say cathedral. This is where you start to get what is like the early times of mass schooling. You had the mini coliseums, you had the town halls, the squares. You had those different places where you had adult education happening, as well as the politics being talked about with the statesmen and those and political power and military power. And then, around the corner, you had the little schools. The kids go off, they learn, they come back home. That transitions over into what? The birth of America, with America, and now the history is being recorded for America. What happens within the first couple of decades of American history? You have first you got the French Revolution, then you have the American Revolution, then you have the Civil War, you have all these different wars that start taking place. And what happens to the educational structure? They need men to fight, so they're pulling the boys, they're pulling the 16, 17, 18-year-olds, they're bringing them into the army. You have what is called total war, where the entire country is focused on all finances, all blacksmith, all anything, all agriculture, all any and everything is used to support the war. What does that leave? That leaves the grandmas, that leaves the wives, that leaves the daughters, that leaves the younger siblings. They got to go take care of the farm, the businesses. We know about the factory work and all those different things, right? And then from that point on, what happens when the sons, the fathers come back from war, right? It becomes a structure where you have what you see now: big buildings, big high schools. Man, listen, I was in the charter school system. There are charter schools that are as big as universities. I'm gonna just throw that out there. I've seen some with my own two eyes. I went to a charter school up in Boynton Beach, and they had a waterfall. Like, it looked like It looked like something from Star Island. I could not believe what I was looking at. It literally looked like something from Star Island. And I was like, this is a charter school? I'm like, who's backing these people? Like, it was insane. But I say all that to say that now we have these educational structures, and it's thousands of kids in one building, and just like I say, my conspiracy theorist mind. Let's just throw some things out, right? If a person was going to annihilate, if they wanted to annihilate an entire generation, go to school, take that school out, done. So that kid who was going to be the first college graduate, he's gone or she's gone. That kid who was going to break generational curses, he or she is gone. Right? And it hurts my heart to have to bring these things to light for people who haven't been thinking this way, but it's the truth. Like we sometimes are not understanding that, with the world changing, that we have to pay attention to the things that mean the most to us. And I'm sorry, but this subculture of violence that has been allowed to run rampant in the United States of America, that specifically, is targeted towards, kids who are going to school to learn. We need to take that more serious. If you are a taxpayer in the United States of America and you care about your kids' education, this should be something you spend, you should be spending 3 to 6 months out of the year lobbying for, to make sure that there is a reform taking place where kids are protected, and places where people go to learn are protected. Or like I said, truth be told, 5 to 10 years, it's going to be annihilated, and we're going to go back to the old days, or the old ways of time, where kids learn from home. They learn directly from their parents, because, let's be honest, nobody out here has money like that to hire a teacher or a nanny who's educated to sit in the house and teach for a 6-hour period. Most Americans, we know this, have less than $10,000 in their bank account for emergency savings, let alone 5,000 or 1,000. So if so, nobody is going to have the means to pay for somebody to educate their kid at home. They're gonna have to do it, right? And it's really gonna show how low America has gone when we start to see stuff like that. If parents are forced to educate their kids, they have to choose their kids' education over their job. Man, the United States will crumble so fast. Look at COVID. I have eyewitness account of parents who were threatening principals and teachers because the workload was too much. I'm talking about full on threatening them because it's too much assignments, too much apps, too much programs, too much sign-ins, passwords, logins. The homework is too long. I'm at work. My kids talk about the Wi-Fi is down. Da 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 da. Listen, people had to face that during COVID. Imagine that becoming a way of life, because the safety of the schools, were not taken seriously due to continuous acts of violence, amongst the students. And then, of course, massive terror acts of violence, with the mass shootings and school shootings. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is something that we cannot take lightly. People might say, man, kids fighting in school, it is what it is. Okay. So if kids fighting in school, that's just a part of it. Kids are gonna fight. Okay, cool. Because guess what? There are other cultures out there that kids fighting in school. They let it happen and people go on about their day. But look at the length that America has allowed it to get in comparison to another country. Look at the length America has allowed it to get, where a kid can get picked on and the next day end the lives of half the population if he can get that far. Because that's where it's gotten in America. So we have to do something about this. And mind you, there's hundreds of videos out there because every day there's a school fight happening, right? But nobody is taking it serious because we've become desensitized to that. But the fact that we have the degree of people being killed on school property, people running into buildings and just taking off on people like that, and that's been going on longer than a decade in the United States of America. No, that should call for a massive reform. And I know a lot of people are uncomfortable. They say, "Oh, you know, we don't want it to be like prison and things like that." That's a whole nother story for a whole nother day. But I'm going to tell you this. It is possible to create a structure for kids to be able to protect themselves and for there's possible for nobody to get in and do bodily harm to the degree that we've seen it. It just takes us changing. We just have to change our mindset, change our ways, change our methods. You know, it's just as simple as that. We have to do so because, we're America is constantly on the chopping block. But when it comes to our educational system, outside from the fact that we always stagger in numbers when it comes to performance, when it comes to safety, I mean, come on now. But definitely, I want to give you guys the opportunity to share your thoughts. Truly, I want to hear what you have to say. I know I said a mouthful. I covered so much with this. And definitely, we can make this a part 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, however many parts as possible. I want to hear your thoughts. Be sure to drop a comment. Like and subscribe if you haven't already subscribed to the podcast. If this is your first episode, show some love in the comment section. On the YouTube, definitely share the podcast. Allow your friends to chime in. I want to hear their thoughts as well, and let's continue to keep this conversation going. Be sure to follow me on all social media platforms: TikTok, Facebook, Threads, Instagram, at Honor Kings and Sons. I appreciate all you guys. That's my time for today. I definitely will come on the subject a little bit more, but I gave you enough to chew on. This is Darian Jones, Honor Kings and Sons TV podcast. You guys be blessed. We'll talk again. Peace.